Hi, everybody. It's Michael Bennet. I want to thank all of you for taking time on a Monday night. I know there's a lot of other things you could do besides being on the call with me, but I'm very grateful. We've got thousands of Coloradans on the phone tonight. We've had about 43,000 calls just in the first 9 weeks of 2025, which is the greatest number of calls we've had ever in the Senate office and in an entire year. And hundreds and hundreds of Coloradans have come to our offices from Fort Collins to Pueblo and all across the Western Slope to have conversations during this really fraught time. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk to people tonight. I don't know who's on the call. I don't know who's going to be asking the questions. I'm delighted to know that there will be Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated people, and people who don't even think of themselves as political, but people that have concerns about what's going on, and that's what we need to do in a democracy. We've got to have these conversations. I'm not going to go on at length at the outset because I want to leave as much time for questions as possible. And but if you do have a question, please dial *3 now. And as I was saying, this has been a particularly challenging time. I'm glad that you've taken time to have this call tonight. We track every single call and email that we get from our office, so I want you to know that we're doing that, and it matters a lot whether you call or whether you don't. I really appreciate seeing people when I'm out traveling around the state as well. It's no secret to anybody on this call that I did not vote for Donald Trump. I deeply regret that he was reelected president of the United States. That's my point of view. I know there are people on this call who probably don't share my point of view, but that's how I feel. And tonight, as the son of somebody who was for a while a federal worker themselves, my dad, and my mom, who was born in Poland in 1938 and suffered, as did her entire family, the invasion of Poland while she was there. I'm very worried. I never thought I'd see the day when an American president would undermine our allies in Ukraine the way Donald Trump is undermining our allies tonight and give comfort to Vladimir Putin. I never thought that while that was happening, he would threaten to impose tariffs on our closest trading partners, on our closest allies, but that's what's happening tonight. And of course, none of this is a game, none of this is just a matter of words. These are the policies of the United States of America because the President of the United States is the one that's enacting them. It's very hard to believe, it's very hard for me to believe, that most people supporting Donald Trump support his policies with respect to Putin. It's very hard for me to believe that most people that voted for Donald Trump support his policies with respect to tariffs on our allies in Canada, in Mexico. And this is a moment when we are all going to have to respond to make sure that we have a government that is acting in a way that's consistent with our values, that's consistent with our principles. And that's what I try to do every single day as your senator. I led the fight against Tulsi Gabbard as a member of the intelligence community because I think she was completely unqualified to be there and because she has taken Russia's side over and over and over. I led the fight against Bobby Kennedy's appointment at HHS because as a former school superintendent, I think it's dangerous to have somebody who's a vaccine denier running HHS. And by the way, I think that's demonstrated by the fact that on Friday, when the President of the United States was yelling at at Zelensky in the Oval Office, there were more people on the very same day who were being diagnosed with measles in the richest country in the world, something that I would never have believed 15 years ago, just 15 years ago, when I was superintendent of the Denver Public Schools. It's why we pushed back so hard on the across-the-board federal funding freeze that the courts have set aside for the moment as unconstitutional. We're fighting on behalf of the 40,000 federal employees that are in Colorado as well. Tonight, I voted against Linda McMahon again, who's the President Trump's nominee for the Department of Education. Again, I was the superintendent of Denver Public Schools. I think there's a lot about our K-12 system that needs to be fixed in America. In fact, I'm quite impatient with what's going on. But I don't think putting the former head of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in as the Secretary of Education is something that any parent across our state would want for our kids and for our grandkids. Tomorrow, as everybody knows, is President Trump's first joint address to Congress. I am going to be there. I'm bringing a former Forest Service employee who was working in the White River National Forest, who is helping us do the work that we need to do on Camp Hale, which is a national monument that I helped lead the creation of during the previous administration. She's now been fired at a moment when the Forest Service, just like BLM, just like all the public lands agencies across our state, are actually dealing with chronic vacancies because it's hard, as everybody on this call knows, for people to even afford housing in Colorado as it is, and therefore it's hard to fill those positions. This administration is trying to make it harder for all of Colorado, and I would say when it comes to those firings, the Western Slope in particular, but it's not just the West Slope. You know, we now know that at the National Weather Service, researchers in Boulder working for NOAA, they've been subject to mass termination. CDC scientists in Fort Collins, who are studying everything from Lyme disease to malaria, have been fired as well. And the list goes on. And I'm going to do everything I can to push back against these short-sighted firings and these unconstitutional funding freezes, and to make sure that Elon Musk doesn't have access to your data at the Treasury, at the IRS. He has no reason to want that data. Donald Trump shouldn't have that data. And I think as we raise the voices of people that are on this call, we also need to make sure that we are working very hard every day to ensure that when we get through this period of time, that we are able to leave something to our kids and to our grandkids that we are proud of, and that we honor the traditions that our parents and grandparents embraced, especially when it comes to America's role in the world. So let me stop there. I'm looking forward to everybody's questions. By the way, nobody has to agree with me. I was a school superintendent, as I said earlier. You will not hurt my feelings. My feelings were beaten out of me a long time ago, and I think it's important for us to have as candid a conversation as we can have. Remember to press *3 at any time during the call if you want to ask a question. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over to Connor. Look forward to your question.
Thank you, Senator. As the Senator just mentioned, if you do have a question, we will remind folks to do that throughout the call. Please press *3. Also, if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, we have a number of staffers on the line, and if you press *6, you will be added to a contributor portion of the call where we can take down your information. So our first call of the night is going to be from Jason from Eaton. Jason, you're now live. Please go ahead and ask your question of the Senator.
Okay, thank you. Senator Bennet, it seems, as the Democrats are the minority party, that your hands are tied, and we can talk about all this stuff, but is there anything you guys can do that's, out of the box, just kind of different procedurally, that you can do anything to hang things up, slow things down, or actually prevent some of these things?
It's such a great question, Jason, and I think it's on everybody's mind. I guess what I'll say at the outset is there are not some magical procedural tricks that are out there. There's not some things that were somehow available to the Republicans when they were in the Senate and Joe Biden was in the White House versus the Democrats today. I think that we just have to make sure that the American people understand with every vote on the floor of the Senate what we're being asked to do, and we have to make sure that we begin to win a battle for public sentiment in this country. I will say that even though I didn't vote for Donald Trump, I know he was elected president of the United States in 2024. We ran one of the best elections in terms of the election administration in a long time because we'd learned from the mistakes in the past when the Russians, for example, were attacking us in 2016. But it is critical that we make sure that in the wake of that, the American people voices are heard, and that's the procedural tools that we are able to use to try to slow things down sometimes, to be able to force votes on the floor or air things in committee hearings, which we will continue to do. I have spent a great deal of time working with the parliamentarian in the Senate, actually going through the rule book, rule by rule by rule, to make sure that I understand all the rules that are available to us at our disposal. And if we have the opportunity to deploy them, we certainly will. Thanks, Jason. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, our next question is from Ian from Highlands Ranch. You're now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Senator Bennet. I am a business owner, and we have the threat of tariffs. I import from Canada, Mexico, and China. I also manufacture some limited in Colorado. The tariffs threaten my importation portion of the business and make me non-competitive. And so I'd like to know what avenues might I have to have the administration receive my comments and possibly help me circumvent or do something about these tariffs before it destroys the businesses that I have.
Do you mind if I ask you, I don't need to necessarily know, is it Ian, I think? Ian, what business you're in? I don't want to ask you anything that makes you uncomfortable, but in terms of the types of thing that would be coming from Canada or Mexico or China, could you just give me just a brief feel for that, and then I'll give you an answer.
No, it's capital equipment. It's used in manufacturing in this country. It's a part of the quality assurance process that we have for manufacturing in this country. There's a short supply of some of the specialized equipment. So it's not consumer commodity products necessarily. It's also not too high tech. We're not talking sophisticated electronics or anything, and we supply to EV manufacturing, we supply to aerospace manufacturing.
Got it.
But we're low tech, part of the quality assurance chain.
Well, thank you for that. That's helpful. First of all, we can always, try to work with the administration to try to make sure they hear your voices. And if you ever need to, and you should, call my office number 303-455-7600. We have people that are taking, the requests of people just like you who are saying, this is how this is killing me, and this is how this is really hurting my business. You shouldn't have to go through that. I'm sorry you are going through it, and you're going to have to, but please call that number, 303-455-7600. I'll give you my email address a little bit later during this call. But I think that targeted tariffs can be an important tool to combat unfair trade practices. There's no doubt about it. But indiscriminate tariffs against our allies and our neighbors, especially when he's taking the position with respect to Russia and Beijing that he is. That just doesn't make any sense at all. The kind of industry that you're talking about, I'm not sure it's true of your business exactly, but the kind of stuff that you're importing is the kind of stuff that gets passed back and forth across the Mexican and Canadian border more than once, a time or two, as it's worked on and finished and changed, like our automobiles, for example. I mean, putting a tariff on businesses in that kind of a situation is like putting a massive tax on the American people. And I know Donald Trump says that's not true, but he's also said for a long time, and the people around him have said for a long time, that he's just threatening this stuff. He doesn't really mean it. We're going to see tomorrow whether that's true. And I hope if you are anybody who's on this call who's getting hurt by those tariffs, please call 303-455-7600. We will raise it with the United States Trade Representative and with the administration so they can understand the effects of putting tariffs on our closest allies and our closest neighbors.
Thanks, Michael. Just a reminder to folks, if you joined late and you have a question that you'd like to ask of Michael, please press *3. And if you'd like to join our newsletter, please press *6. Our next call is from Barbara from Fort Collins. Barbara, you're now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I would like to know what we as citizens can do other than writing letters. It won't do any good for me to write a letter to Lauren Bobert, but I could write to you, but I know your answer. So I just don't know how we should react. I don't know if large gatherings, I don't know if you know that there's a planned gathering tomorrow in Fort Collins at the Federal Post Office. I think it's from 6 to 8:30, and I plan to go, but I know people who are hurting, people who are losing jobs, and also security, Homeland Security gives money to the synagogue and probably the mosque in Fort Collins for security, and they're very worried about that money. And I don't know how that can be addressed.
Yeah, Barbara, first of all, that's a real worry for me. I fought very hard to get that money into the budget in the last couple of years of the Biden administration because, unfortunately, sad to say, there are religious institutions all across the country that have felt under threat and have had to be supported in their efforts to harden their facilities. I think this is a moment where it is important for us to raise our voices and be heard. Just speaking for myself, I don't think just registering your views on social media or Facebook is probably enough. I know that's not what you said you would do, but I think sometimes we think that if we've said something or online that somehow that's the same thing as showing up. I think showing up is really important. We've seen the administration's federal funding freeze pushed back on successfully by the American people. They have tried, at least for the moment. They're maybe trying to find another way of doing it. We have seen the employees that have been let go very, very bravely raise their voices. And I've seen people coming to town halls of senators and House members around the country who are also raising their concerns about the policies that Donald Trump is pursuing. This is no longer about rhetoric. It's about the actual actions of the administration. So I just encourage all of us to be involved, and I would encourage all of us to try to engage young people in this debate and discussion as well, because in the end, the decisions that we're making or not making are much more important to them. I believe very strongly that this country's survival and our future depends very much on young people being involved in the political, not just discussion, but battles as well. And this is a good moment for that to happen.
Okay, our next question is from Mark from Glenwood Springs. Mark, you are now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, Senator Bennet, for doing this evening. My question is regarding the funds that have been frozen by Congress or by the President that were already passed under the Inflation Reduction Act. Specifically, I know recently the money has been frozen for reclamation projects in the upper Colorado River Basin. I was wondering if there's any way we can start possibly getting those funds released, and how can he do that, being that they've already been passed by Congress?
I appreciate that, and thank you, Mark, for raising that. That money that you're talking about was part of $4 billion that I was able to help secure in the Inflation Reduction Act, not just for the upper basin, but for the lower basin as well, to do important projects like the ones you just described. And some of them are being frozen just at the worst possible moment. This is the time, as you know, we have to do the work. We can't do the work in the summer because of the stream flows in many of these rivers. And that's why an across-the-board freeze makes no sense. That's why doing it at a moment like this makes no sense. I do think that for the reasons that you said, that in the end the courts will not uphold what he has done on this point, because it is money that has been appropriated by the Congress, and Congress has the power of the purse. In the meantime, I have been going to the various agencies as soon as people are here and telling them, and I'm hearing from my constituents, and sometimes they say, we didn't even know we'd frozen that money, or sometimes they say, you know, we haven't figured it out, which is obviously an unacceptable answer. With respect to the IRA money, unfortunately, I believe that has been targeted by the administration because they think that, you know, having a climate policy is a bad idea. I think that these projects that we have in Colorado as a result of the IRA, which substantial amounts of funds were dedicated to our state because of our leadership on water and energy, on both those things, that I think the administration is going to discover that they are wildly popular with Republicans and Democrats and unaffiliated voters in Colorado, and our job is to make them understand that and to relent. And in the meantime, let me also say again that if you know of projects that have been canceled, we want to hear that from you. I'll give my office number in a minute again. Connor?
Yes, thank you. Next we have Benta from Grand Junction. You are now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, Senator. I'm curious about what you're doing to protect our national parks. I'm mostly worried about if any of the policy that's being enforced or pushed for fracking and drilling on public lands is going to start bleeding into Colorado state parks. I'm also concerned about whether or not the NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, is pushed to be reversed. And I'm also curious about what we as citizens can do. I recognized earlier another Colorado citizen asked that we can write letters. What else are we supposed to do other than vote? Are we just supposed to wait for these changes to be passed down? I'm concerned that once these lands start getting fracked, drilled, there's no reversing that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your asking the question. You know, I've long believed that there are places that are appropriate, you know, for oil and gas drilling, and then there are places where it is not appropriate, and our national parks and much of our public land fall into that category, which is why I've, you know, worked so hard to protect places like the Thompson Divide and Mount Emmons and Camp Hale. And I, as each one of these nominees has come through to see me before they've gone for a vote on the Senate floor, I've made sure they understand just how much Colorado cherishes our public land, and that things that might make sense to them for some reason from an ideological perspective don't make any sense when they're on the ground in Colorado. I do think with respect to the environmental statutes that you're talking about, they will make every attempt they can to relax it. And we do need to push back, both in lawsuits and also in public meetings. I don't think that it's just about writing letters, although writing letters is good, but we need to do a lot more than that. I voted last week. We forced a vote. We've already had several votes to overturn what the Trump administration is trying to do here. Unfortunately, the Republicans have been voting together, and that's made it difficult for us so far to be able to do it. But I hope you will keep pushing. And I also want to just say again, for people that voted for Donald Trump, he has declared what he calls an energy emergency, and oil is at $73 a barrel in the United States of America. The last year of the Biden administration, we produced more oil in this country than any country in the history of mankind. And the fact that he is claiming that, quote unquote, and by the way, we replaced half of Russia's oil so that we could keep our allies in the fight against Ukraine with American liquefied natural gas, which, by the way, I think was a huge success for the American people and for our allies. But for him to claim this national energy emergency as the excuse for why he's destroying solar jobs and wind jobs and other clean energy jobs on the western slope of Colorado, on the eastern plains, makes no sense to me.
Okay, next we have Deanna from Aurora. Deanna, you are now live.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this town hall, Senator. So we can't wait 2 years.
I'm
right?
sorry. Well, could you say your name again and just start again? I apologize. I just couldn't hear you. Thanks.
Sure. My name is Deanna. I'm from Aurora. I don't think we can wait 2 years. So what are you doing to influence your Republican colleagues to stop Elon from running amok and or to talk some sense into these moderate Republicans to prevent some of these things from going through?
Well, I don't first of all, think anybody should wait 2 years. I completely agree with that. We should be making sure that we're doing everything we can to lift up what's going on here and that we're holding people accountable. I find it just staggering myself. I was just saying this tonight on the floor of the Senate, that there's not one Republican today who sees the benefit of standing up and saying, I am actually going to defend Ukraine in this battle. I'm actually going to stand against Vladimir Putin. I'm actually going to stand up for the United States against this combination between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, because it is shocking to me that people could roll over for this, but we're faced with a moment where it's not, at least in Washington among my Republican colleagues, there are not left a bunch of people that I would describe as moderate Republicans, as you just did. I used to say that the caucus was about a third Trump people, a third people that didn't think that Trump was right but were too scared to say anything about it, and then a third people who would stand up to him. And right now at this moment, we don't have it. And Donald Trump knows that better than anybody else. That's why he put Pete Hegseth on the floor first, the Secretary of Defense, and he dared the Republican senators to vote against a Saturday morning Fox News TV personality to be the Secretary of Defense, who had one thing after another that meant he wouldn't have been hired to do, any job in Colorado if they had known what his record was. And he did that to show to the American people that when they're voting for people like that, they're so scared of him that they'll have that vote. And we have to insist that that's not adequate. We can't wait for 2 years for it. We've got to have people come home to their constituents and have to explain why they did that. Each one of those people on the Senate floor is a statewide elected official. They're not represented only Republican districts, and I hope they'll hear from people who know that the legacy of the United States is to stand up to dictators like Vladimir Putin, not make his life easier.
Thanks, Michael. Next, we have Mary from Denver. Mary, you're now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. Thank you, Senator Bennet, for holding this town hall. My question, I got so many of them, it has to do with the budget reconciliation framework bill. Sorry.
That's all right.
I saw something. So what I want to know is what can be done to keep this from going any further than it already has, because it's unconscionable to have millionaires and billionaires reaping the benefits of tax cuts on the bodies of SNAP children, on Medicaid, on you name it. The list goes on, agriculture. So it's got to be stopped. And this, in my opinion, this dictator that I just have never I cannot understand how someone can change the direction of a country in 100 days and not be a dictator. And it's not even been 100 days. It just feels like it. But sorry, I rambled a little bit.
No, that's all right, Mary. I think it's why it's so important that everybody is on this call, that we're having this discussion, that we share the facts as we know them, and we try to move past the rumors and untruths that are on, for example, the internet and social media. I mean, this tax bill that Donald Trump is probably going to end up passing, I'm sorry to say it, but he can pass reconciliation with only 51 votes in the Senate, and therefore he only needs Republicans to pass it. If he passes the bill that he's talking about passing, which is kind of the same bill that he passed in 2017, 55% of the benefit of that went to the top 5% of Americans. And the middle class and working people got barely any benefit at all from it, if any benefit at all. It is a huge giveaway to the wealthiest people. And when I saw the folks sitting behind him at his inauguration, the guys that run those massive social media companies, who are not paying the same amount of taxes as teachers or firefighters or police officers in Colorado in terms of their percentage, are able to pass their estates to their very, very lucky children with zero tax. So they spend their whole lives accruing the benefit for it. They borrow against these assets. They never have to sell a share of their stock, and then they can give it away for free. No one else in America gets that deal, and there's a reason why they were sitting behind Donald Trump on his inauguration. And I think I just want to say, to be very direct about it, we are going to be unable to stop that bill because we don't have the votes to do it. We don't have 51 votes. But I think it's going to be critically important for us to go out and explain to the American people what they have done, who's benefited. And the massive benefit is going to the wealthiest people in the country, and it's probably not even going to be paid for. And I think you might have said you were from Aurora. If I'm making that up, I'll take it back. But if you're from Glenwood Springs or Aurora or Springfield or Denver or it doesn't matter, any town in Colorado, and the mayor came to you and said, I'm going to borrow more money than I've ever borrowed in the history of our town. And you said, well, that worries me. I'm worried that you're going to borrow that much money. What are you going to spend the money on? Are you going to spend it on education? No. Are you going to spend it on parks? No. Are you going to spend it on mental health? No. Are you going to spend it on health care? No. What are you going to spend it on? And the answer was, I have this really interesting economic theory. I'm going to take the proceeds of that, the debt that I'm borrowing as the president or as the mayor, and I'm going to give it to the two richest neighborhoods in the town and let it trickle out to everybody else, trickle down to everybody else. There's a reason why no mayor in American history has ever done that, because we would go crazy. And that is the tax policy that President Trump pursued in 2017, and it's the tax policy he's pursuing again. And the bill is going to be paid by someone. It's going to be paid by Colorado's farmers and ranchers and our the children of our police officers and of our teachers. And it is fundamentally unfair, as you said. Last time he got away with it because he went out there and said it was a middle-class tax cut, even though it wasn't. This time we need to make it clear what he's doing, and that's what I will fight to do.
Okay, next we have Russ from Greenwood Village. Russ, you are now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bennet, for holding the town hall and candidly speaking to us.
Thanks, Russ.
One of the key things you said earlier was showing up. And to that point, my wife and I, we understand that Dems don't have the votes in the Senate and the House, but you still have access to the media in this country. A lot of it's still powerful. And I think we'd like to see, this is a comment, and then I'll ask a question. We'd like to see the Democrats mount a unified action, which is to get in Donald Trump's face, which is the only thing he ever knew, and PR category to a PR plan to explain what he is doing fundamentally and how it impacts adversely anybody but the Elon Musks of this world. So to the extent
Okay.
work on that and tee up what we need to do in the midterms in 2 years, that'd be great. If you could do that, it'd be wonderful. The
Thank
question,
you.
along that lines, can the Democrats and their allies come up with some comprehensive plan to support our allies? Trump just said a few minutes ago that he's pausing aid to the Ukraine, which means he's given Putin battlefield latitude all over again. But I think we need to support Ukraine and NATO and Taiwan and to defend our Constitution. And so to the extent you guys can come up with a plan to do those things, we would support it. We'll walk on the streets for you. We'll give you money, and we'll take any other actions you can. And I enjoyed hearing the emotion in your voice when you talked to the last caller. So, go give them.
Thanks, Russ. I appreciate it, and that's breaking news that you're giving me. That I now have a thing in front of me saying that Donald Trump is temporarily suspending all military aid to Ukraine. Let me just say a few things about this. I care a lot about this, partly because of where my mom was born. I mentioned she's still alive. She's 86 years old and cannot believe she's lived long enough to see another land war break out in Europe. It's impossible for her to believe, and yet it's happened. What's more unbelievable to her is that an American president could undermine our allies the way Donald Trump is and could be making Vladimir Putin's life so easy. And let me tell you something. You know, there's been a lot of talk in the last 2 weeks, and I'm talking to everybody, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. There's been a lot of talk about what Ukraine owes us. And the American people have been really generous. We've sent $100 billion to Ukraine. The Europeans have sent about the same amount to Ukraine. That is really, really generous. But we also owe a huge debt to Zelensky and to the Ukrainian people. They have suffered 400,000 casualties on the battlefield with Putin. They didn't ask for this invasion. They didn't cause this invasion. Ukraine did not invade Russia, which Donald Trump said. And to your point, Russ, can you imagine what we would do if an American president said that Taiwan had invaded China, when China had invaded Taiwan. It is unbelievable. And the guy is trolling America. It's not because he's a Republican, it's because he's Donald Trump. And if he is going to force us to do it, we are going to have to find a way to stand up with our allies, because if we don't, Putin is just going to keep going and keep going and keep going, because that's what he does. I can't believe how naive President Trump has been. And those 400,000 casualties are real. I was in Kyiv, in Ukraine, 10 days ago, and I saw the children's hospital that had been shelled in the middle of that city. I saw the apartment buildings that had been shelled. That's a long way from the battlefield. I saw the people in Poland who have been working on the refugee resettlement of the millions of Ukrainians who have had to flee the war, mostly women and children, whose funding has now been cut off because of Donald Trump's cancellation of aid, who have had to take the American flag off of classrooms in Poland because they were instructed by our government not to do that. So this is a critical moment for us. And I can tell you that Xi Jinping is watching what is happening here. Vladimir Putin is not just watching. We told him today that we were taking off all of our offensive cyber activity with respect to Russia. I can tell you, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, without revealing anything from that committee, it won't surprise you to know that Russia is constantly attacking us from a cyber perspective. So this is not a moment where we should be putting up the white flag. It's not a moment where we should be turning our backs on our allies. It's not a moment where his personal, anger at Zelensky, for reasons that, frankly, I have a hard time understanding, should be dictating American foreign policy. The stakes are much too high. And I hope that we are going to be able to come together as the American people and insist that he do this differently. In the meantime, I am having lots of conversations with the leadership of our allied countries throughout Europe and frankly throughout Asia as well, to see what we're going to do to be able to maintain the kind of alliances that are so important to protecting the free world. And that's not an exaggeration. That's what's at stake here.
All right, we've got time for a few more questions here. Next, we are going to have Melissa from Aurora. Melissa, you are now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Senator Bennet. My name is Melissa. I'm from Aurora. I appreciate your time. First of all, I'm a veteran. Hello, Senator Bennet. I'm a single mom, and I'm a veteran, and I also work for the federal government here in Colorado. I moved to Colorado for this federal job that I love more than anything, helping the American people. And as you might be aware, we're being harassed daily by Elon Musk to justify our jobs, and we are very scared. All of us are having mental health issues as a result. And I guess two-part question. One is, I know you said things are being done to help protect federal workers, but I just would like to know specifically what is going to be done. And second, we heard there's a memo coming out that they're going to drastically reduce the workforce before March 13th. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'm hearing pretty large numbers. So I'm wondering if you have any more information about that, like how many more workers are going to be cut and what's being done to protect the federal workers.
I want to thank you for being willing to get on this call and to talk about, is it Melissa? To talk about this, because I know there are, as I mentioned earlier, 40,000 federal employees all across the state of Colorado, and you're very, very wonderful to be on this call and raise your voice not only for yourself but for them as well. And thank you also for your service as a veteran. So many of our federal employees are veterans. So many of the people that work in our Forest Service and in our public lands agencies for the VA in Aurora and on the Western Slope of Colorado, at the scientific institutes that I mentioned earlier. So many of them are veterans. Every single one of them is a public servant, and now we're going to have these massive layoffs, or at least they're being threatened by the federal government. We will continue to push. They have withdrawn some of what they've tried to do. The courts have shut them down on some stuff and not on others. For example, AID, they said that the president could shut down, but some of the across-the-board stuff, they've said that he shouldn't be able to do. I hope you will continue to let us know. I'm going to give you some contact information in a minute. We're also going to do a call with federal employees in Colorado that's next week to make sure that I'm in a position to hear your stories and advocate on your behalf. I'm going to continue to share the stories of affected Coloradans on the Senate floor and on the news as I travel the state. In the meantime, I would just ask you to visit my website. It's Bennet, which, by the way, is BENNET, 1T, bennet.senate.gov, where we have a resource page that's specifically designed for federal workers. We update that daily with the latest information that we have. On my website, you can also write me a message. The button is on the home page, and we will get back to you. You can always call my office. Again, the number is 303-455-7600. I think everybody could say that there is not an institution in America that could be managed more efficiently, including the federal government. But the way that they are approaching this has nothing to do with efficiency. It has nothing to do with making things work better. It's simply an attack on the federal workforce, and it's the American people, really, ultimately, who are going to pay the price. I can tell you, your example is an important one. The public lands agencies I mentioned, the fact that there are people at the CIA, which I am I provide part of the oversight from that as a member of the Intelligence Committee. They're sending the same letter to the CIA, people that are engaged in some of the most important work on behalf of the American people that's very, very hard to replace, and they're getting the same treatment, whether you're a nurse at the VA who's taking care of patients that has no one else to take care of them, or a nuclear physicist who's working to secure America's nuclear weapons. Every one of you is at risk in this administration.
Okay,
Next
I think we have time for two more questions here. Yep. Next, we have Lynette from Aurora. Lynette, you are now live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Senator Bennet. I can feel the frustration and outrage and anger when you speak, and I feel that very deeply. And because of that, I want to know why you voted for 5 or 6 or 7 of Trump's cabinet nominations.
Sure, and I'm very, very grateful that you asked me that question. I mean, you can tell how I feel about what we're doing here, in part for the reasons that I won't repeat of my own family experience, in part because every single day that I'm here, for the entire time that I've been here, I've thought about the kids that I used to work for in the Denver public schools, whether their lives are getting better, whether the kids living in rural Colorado, whether their lives are getting better. And you'll notice that tonight, this is the reality that we're in. Tonight, that's not the conversation we're having. We're not having a conversation about how do we make education better for kids in America. We're not having a conversation about how do we deal with the mental health crisis that exists for children in our country. We're not having a conversation about how to deliver health care at a better cost or protect the public lands of the United States. We're talking about how to deal with a president who's out there saying Canada should be our 51st state. He's going to build hotels in Gaza. He's going to roll over for Putin and roll over for Xi Jinping. That is all of that stuff is not only utterly counterproductive, but doesn't allow us to get to the work that we all actually need to do so that we can leave a country that is better shape for our kids and our grandkids, and so we can restore America's place in the world. So that, when you say you sound like you're frustrated, you sound like, that's the core of it for me, is to make sure that every American generation is leaving more, not less, to the people coming after us. We are at risk of being the first generation not to do that. In fact, before Donald Trump was elected, it was true in America that 50% of children, they're not children compared to me, they are 50% of Americans in their, who are 30 today will earn less money than their parents earn. That is never happened before in American history, and that's what it looks like when you begin to see, a lack of economic mobility, where people are working hard, but they feel like they can't get ahead no matter what they do, no matter how hard they work. Their kids aren't going to be better off than they are. That is a breakdown of the American dream. It may be some of the reasons why Donald Trump was elected, and it's that is what we need to address. And the stuff that we're having to consume ourselves with tonight and every night for the foreseeable future is taking us away from that. I want to be specific, though. I voted yes for some nominees where I thought they were qualified, and I thought the vote was an important vote for Colorado. For example, I voted for Brooke Collins, who's the Secretary of Agriculture, who I think got a unanimous vote out of the Agriculture Committee. I'm on that committee, and the farmers and ranchers in Colorado, I think, are going through an enormously difficult time, in part because of the tariffs, in part because of other instability and unpredictability, and I thought it was useful to vote for her. I voted for Marco Rubio, my old colleague. 99 senators voted for him, partly because he was in the Senate, I think partly so that there was somebody in the national security orbit that we could talk to, which was the same reason why I voted for the CIA director, because I'd led the fight against Tulsi Gabbard, and I know what a disaster she's going to be. I'm hoping that I'm able to have a constructive relationship with the CIA director. I voted for the head of the VA, Doug Collins. We've got 340,000 veterans living in Colorado. He was a member of the House of Representatives before he was in that position. I voted also for Doug Burgum, who is the Interior Secretary nominee, who's a successful businessman and a two-term governor. So that's the answer to why I voted yes. And I guess my view of this always has been that we should look at each one of these decisions, and I think about it in terms of what's going to make the lives better for the children and families that I represent in Colorado. And sometimes that might lead me to cast a vote that you wouldn't cast, and I hope in the long run we agree that I tried my best, which is all I can ask for.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep.
We have time for one last question here. We have Julia Ann from Denver. Julia, you are now live. Please ask your question.
Hi, Senator Bennet. My name is
Hi.
Julia. Hi, I live in Denver. I'm concerned about the House budget bill that passed last week and the $880 billion that is going to be cut from energy and commerce, which everybody knows is going to be from Medicaid. So I'm wanting to know what you're doing to try to stop that from happening. And if you can't stop that from happening, what are you going to do for the over 400,000 Coloradans in Colorado that are on Medicare?
Thank you, Julia, for raising it. The Medicaid is hugely important to Colorado, and I think there are, when people hear who's actually on Medicaid, it's 400,000 people, as you mentioned. Many of them are poor children. Many of them are families who have spent down every single nickel so they can be in a long-term care facility that's funded by Medicaid. Some of them are people with severe disabilities. Some of them are people that are working two jobs, and can't, or still aren't able to afford health care. It it is a safety net program that is vitally important to the health of our state, the health of the nation, and I think that we were just having a conversation 2 hours ago in my office about the very question that you asked. We're going to see on Monday, I think, or Tuesday, whether the House can pass its budget with those draconian Medicaid cuts. So far, the Senate has said they wouldn't sign up for these cuts, and we keep, as a member of the Finance Committee, which is where Medicaid is dealt with, I keep raising in front of everybody, that this is who it is, who's in our state, who are in our states, who are in your states, who are on Medicaid. And it would be one thing for you to cut it, I suppose, if you had actually something to replace it with or something that would be better. But the only thing that it's going to replace it with is nothing. So you will find ourselves in a place where senior citizens can no longer afford the long-term facilities that they're in throughout urban and rural Colorado. You will have kids who don't have access to health care anymore, whose moms are taking them to the emergency rooms all over Colorado in order to get treated like any parent would. I mean, it's not like we're not going to pay for it one way or another. We'll just do it in the most expensive way possible. And we'll have to see. Please watch what happens on Tuesday. We'll have to decide then if the House fails to pass their budget. I think that's going to give Democrats a real opportunity to say that if you want to get this budget across the finish line, you're going to need our votes, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get a package that's much more palatable for the American people. And so far, the Republicans in the Senate have been a little more cagey about where they are on this issue. And but I will say, as the caller from Aurora, I think it was Mary, said, let's see, I can remember so long ago now, Mary, who was asking about the reconciliation package and the tax cuts for the rich. It is a staggering notion that they would pay for tax cuts that the vast majority of the benefit went to the wealthiest people in the country when we've got the worst income inequality since the 1920s, and that if they were going to pay for it, which I doubt they really will, I mean, I don't doubt that they'll try to cut Medicaid, but I doubt they'll largely pay for it. But to the extent they do try to do something, that they would cut the poorest children off of their health care program to do it, that they would cut long-term care from seniors throughout our states to do it. And if that is what they do, we're going to have to make sure that the American people understand it, because there's a very different choice that can be available to them. And we'll have to fight that fight. So I think, is that it, or do we have time? No. They're cutting me off. We will do this again. We'll do this again and again and again. I want to give you my number again. It's 303-455-7600. I'm looking for my website again is Bennet, BENNET.senate.gov. If your question didn't get answered tonight, or if you've shared a federal caseworker request tonight while we've been on call, a member of my staff will be in touch with you shortly. If you are a federal worker who's been affected by the firings, please remember to come to my website, Bennet.senate.gov, as I said, where we have a resource page that is specifically designed for federal employees. Please share your stories there as well. If you haven't signed up for my weekly newsletter, I encourage you to do so. And I hope that we will continue. I know we will continue to have this conversation. And I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days in my town halls. And in the meantime, I hope you'll stay in touch. This is a very, very difficult time for our country and for families all across the state of Colorado. The one thing we cannot do is give up hope. And the one thing we cannot do is stop making sure that our voices are heard. That is what those who, the people that have come before us, who have faced difficult times, different times, some harder and some not as hard, but faced difficult times in their own time, they never gave up either, and that's why we are where we are. And when I think about the sacrifices that have been made in this moment on that battlefield in Ukraine, I think about the sacrifices that are made every day by people that are signing up to teach our children in my old school district and school districts all across the country, who have served our nation as veterans, and just everybody who in their daily life knows that we all have a reciprocal responsibility to each other, that we have a duty to one another and to the next generation of Coloradans and to Americans. I want to thank you for caring so much about our state and for caring so much about our country. I hope you'll have a little bit of time tonight to think about something else, something other than this. Read a book that has something to do with something else. Watch a show that has something to do with something else, and then get some sleep, and we'll talk about it again tomorrow. Thank you for being on this call tonight.